The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the street as Joran pulled up to his modest apartment. He had been dreading this day for weeks. Sharing his space with anyone, let alone an alien, felt like an intrusion into his carefully crafted solitude. When he opened the door, Ilari was already there. She, or at least, Joran thought of her as she, though the alien's gender was a complex topic, stood near the window, her elongated fingers tracing the edge of a plant pot. Her skin shimmered like stardust under the sunlight, and her eyes, deep and liquid, seemed to hold a universe within them. "You're Joran," she said, her voice soft but resonant, like a song hummed underwater. "And you're—" "Ilari," Joran replied, his voice faltering. The first week was awkward. Ilari found human customs baffling. She didn't understand the concept of personal space, often standing too close to Joran or curiously inspecting his belongings. One evening, she held up a fork and asked, "Why do humans use these tiny tridents to consume food?" "It's just how we do things," Joran said with a shrug. Their interactions were a dance of misunderstandings and small discoveries. Ilari learned to enjoy earth foods, though she insisted on eating with her hands, and Joran found himself fascinated by her world. She spoke of vast cities made of crystal and forests that glowed with bioluminescent life, her words painting vivid images in his mind. But it wasn't all smooth. There were arguments, like when Ilari rearranged the furniture to align with cosmic energy flows, leaving Joran tripping over misplaced chairs. Yet, despite the clashes, a strange bond began to form. One rainy evening, Joran found Ilari sitting by the window, her silvery glow reflecting off the glass. "Does the rain bother you?" he asked, sitting beside her. "No," she said, her voice softer than usual. "It's soothing. On my world, water falls upward, not down. This feels grounding." For the first time, Joran noticed the vulnerability in her voice, the longing for a home so far away. He offered her a blanket, and their hands brushed, a fleeting touch, but enough to send an unfamiliar warmth through him. In that moment, something shifted. They were no longer just a human and an alien thrown together by circumstance. They were two beings, both far from understanding but willing to try. The days turned into weeks, and Joran began noticing the little things about Ilari. Her laughter, which sounded like wind chimes, seemed to brighten the room. Her curiosity, though occasionally exasperating, had a charm of its own. One day, he caught her in the kitchen, attempting to cook earth food. "What are you doing?" Joran asked, biting back a laugh. Ilari looked up, her luminous eyes wide with innocence. "I am preparing sustenance. I observed you doing this yesterday." The counter was a chaotic mess of flour, eggshells, and alien spices that shimmered unnaturally in the light. Joran wasn't sure whether to be impressed or horrified. "You're supposed to crack the eggs, not crush them," he said, gently taking the carton from her. Ilari tilted her head. "Crack. Show me." He demonstrated, tapping an egg against the edge of a bowl until it split neatly. She mimicked him with her elegant fingers, her movements precise and deliberate. When she succeeded, her face lit up like a sunrise. "This is enjoyable," she said, her tone filled with genuine wonder. Joran couldn't help but smile. Cooking is about more than just making food. It's about the experience, the creativity. They spent the next hour working together, and though the results were far from perfect, the shared laughter made it worthwhile. That evening, as they sat down to eat their unevenly cooked meal, Ilari observed Joran closely. "Why do humans seek companionship?" she asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. "I guess, because it makes life better. Sharing moments with someone else, it gives things more meaning." Ilari leaned forward, her eyes searching his face. "On my world, companionship is logical. Bonds are formed for survival, for mutual benefit. But with humans, it seems deeper." "Why?" Joran hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's not just about survival for us. It's about connection. Feeling understood, cared for. It makes us feel alive." Ilari nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps. I am beginning to understand." There was a silence between them, not awkward but heavy with unspoken words. Joran found himself staring at her, at the way her silvery skin seemed to glow softly in the dim light, at the way her lips curved slightly when she was lost in thought. One night, everything changed. Joran was lying on the couch, half asleep, when he heard a soft sound from Ilari's room. It was a low hum, almost like a melody, but tinged with sadness. He got up and knocked lightly on her door. "Are you okay?" The door slid open, and Ilari stood there, her glow dimmer than usual. "I was remembering. On my world, we sing to the stars when we feel longing. Tonight, I miss home." Joran hesitated, then stepped inside. The room was bare except for a small crystal sphere that hovered in the air, casting shifting patterns of light on the walls. "You're not alone," he said softly. Ilari looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Your world is beautiful, but it is not mine. Phil, I am beginning to feel something here. Something I do not have words for." Joran felt his chest tighten. He didn't know what to say, so he simply sat beside her. "Maybe you don't need words," he said after a while. "Sometimes, feelings speak for themselves." She turned to him, her expression unreadable. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and touched his hand. Her skin was cool but sent a warm shiver through him. "Thank you," she whispered. In that quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them. It was fragile, like the first bloom of a flower, but it was there. Days turned into months, and the initial awkwardness between Joran and Ilari gave way to a rhythm. They shared meals, swapped stories, and sometimes sat in companionable silence. Yet, beneath the growing familiarity, both felt the pull of something unspoken, something fragile and exhilarating. One evening, Joran came home to find Ilari sitting cross-legged on the floor, her crystal sphere floating in front of her. The lights in the room were dim, casting long shadows that danced to the rhythm of the sphere's subtle glow. "What are you doing?" he asked, setting down his bag. Ilari didn't look up. "I am meditating. It is a practice from my world. We connect with the energies around us, grounding ourselves. Can anyone do it?" Joran asked, intrigued. Ilari finally glanced at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Perhaps. Sit with me." Joran hesitated but eventually sank to the floor across from her. She took his hands in hers, her touch cool and soothing. "Close your eyes," she instructed. Her voice was soft, melodic, and Joran found himself obeying without question. As she guided him through the exercise, he felt a strange warmth spreading through him, a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in years. When they finished, Joran opened his eyes to find Ilari watching him. "You carry a weight," she said, her tone gentle but probing. "What is it?" Joran stiffened. "It's nothing. Just life." But Ilari wasn't easily deterred. "On my world, we believe that sharing burdens makes them lighter. You have been kind to me, Joran. Let me do the same for you." Her sincerity was disarming. After a long pause, Joran sighed. "My parents, they passed away a few years ago. It's been hard since then. I guess I've been trying to figure out who I am without them." Ilari's grip on his hands tightened slightly. "Loss is universal. On my world, we sing the memories of those who leave us into the stars, believing they hear us. Have you shared your memories of them with anyone?" Joran shook his head. "Not really." Ilari smiled softly. "Then share them with me." That night, Joran talked about his parents, the way his mother used to hum while cooking, the way his father always seemed to have a bad joke ready. Ilari listened intently, her luminous eyes fixed on him, her presence a quiet comfort. In turn, Ilari began to open up about her own struggles. She spoke of her home planet, where individuality was often sacrificed for the greater good. "We are raised to suppress our personal desires," she explained. "But here, I am learning that it is not weakness to feel deeply." Her confession surprised Joran. He had always seen her as poised and confident, but now he realized she, too, carried burdens. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I do not miss the loneliness that comes with hiding who you are." Joran's chest tightened. "You're not alone anymore, Ilari." Her gaze met his, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink around them. The air grew heavy with unspoken emotion. As their bond deepened, so did their mutual curiosity about each other's worlds. One evening, Ilari asked Joran to teach her a human dance. "Dancing? I'm not exactly an expert," Joran said, laughing. "All the better," she replied with a mischievous smile. They cleared a space in the living room, and Joran connected his phone to a speaker. As soft music filled the air, He extended a hand toward her. "Okay, just follow my lead," he said, feeling awkward. Hilary placed her hand in his, her touch sending a shiver up his spine. Her movements were graceful, but her understanding of the steps was creative. She twirled when she was supposed to step forward, and more than once, she nearly toppled into him. Laughter filled the room, unrestrained and joyous. For the first time in years, Joran felt truly carefree. When the music slowed, so did they. Joran realized they were standing closer than before, their breaths mingling. He could see the faint glow of Hilary's skin, feel the warmth radiating between them. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "For what?" "For showing me that vulnerability is not weakness. And for being you." Joran's heart raced as he searched her eyes. "Hilary, I—" But before he could finish, she stepped back, breaking the spell. "We should rest," she said, her voice barely audible. Joran watched as she disappeared into her room, leaving him standing there, his emotions a tangled mess. The section ends with Joran and Hilary both feeling the weight of their deepening connection but unsure how to navigate it. Days passed, but the atmosphere between Joran and Hilary felt different. There was a charged energy in the air, something both thrilling and terrifying. Joran found himself overthinking every interaction, while Hilary seemed quieter, more contemplative. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching an old movie, the tension reached its breaking point. The scene on the screen was romantic, a human couple confessing their feelings under a moonlit sky. Joran stole a glance at Hilary, whose eyes were fixed on the screen, her expression unreadable. "You've been quiet lately," Joran said, breaking the silence. Hilary turned to him, her gaze piercing. "I have been thinking." "About what?" "About you," she said simply, as if the words weren't sending Joran's heart into overdrive. "And about us." Joran swallowed hard. "Us?" Hilary tilted her head, her silvery hair falling like liquid light over her shoulder. "I have been observing human interactions, particularly the bonds you call romantic. I find them fascinating. They seem to be driven by emotions more than logic." "That's pretty accurate," Joran said, unsure of where this was going. Hilary leaned closer, her glow intensifying. "I believe I am beginning to understand those emotions. When I am with you, I feel something I cannot explain. It is not logical, but it is undeniable." Joran's breath hitched. "Hilary, are you saying—" "Yes," she interrupted, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "I believe I am experiencing what you call affection. Perhaps even attraction." The words hung in the air, heavy and electric. Joran's mind raced, but before he could respond, Hilary continued. "On my world, such feelings are not common. Bonds are formed for specific purposes, survival, procreation, but not for emotional connection. I wish to understand this better. And I wish to explore it with you." Joran blinked, his brain struggling to keep up. "You want to explore this? With me?" Hilary nodded, her luminous eyes searching his. "If you are willing." The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Joran's heart was pounding so loudly he was sure Hilary could hear it. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Do you not feel the same?" she asked, her voice soft but unflinching. Joran hesitated. "I do. I think I do." "You're incredible, Hilary. But this is new territory for me, too." Hilary's lips curved into a small smile. "Then perhaps we can learn together." She reached out, her fingers brushing against his. The touch was light, but it sent a wave of warmth through Joran. He found himself leaning closer, drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. That night marked the beginning of their experiment, a journey into uncharted emotional and physical territory. They decided to take things slowly, to communicate openly about their feelings and boundaries. Their first step was simple, spending more intentional time together. They shared stories late into the night, learning about each other's pasts, hopes, and fears. Hilary told Joran about her people's view on relationships, which were largely utilitarian. "But here," she said, her voice tinged with wonder, "I am learning that connection can be an end in itself." Joran, in turn, opened up about his struggles with vulnerability. "I've always been afraid to let people in," he admitted. "But with you it feels different. Easier, somehow." One evening, As they sat under the stars in the small backyard, Hilary turned to Joran with a serious expression. "There is one aspect of human relationships I do not understand," she said. "Physical intimacy. It seems to be a significant part of your bonds." Joran felt his cheeks heat up. "Well, yeah. It's a way of expressing love and closeness." Hilary tilted her head. "Would you teach me?" The question hung in the air, bold and unfiltered. Joran's heart raced, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes. She wasn't asking out of obligation or curiosity alone. There was a genuine desire to connect. Hilary, are you sure?" She nodded. "On my world, physical bonds are clinical, transactional. But with you, I wish to experience what it means to connect in a way that is meaningful." Joran hesitated, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw not just curiosity but trust. "Okay," he said finally. "But only if we both feel comfortable every step of the way." Hilary smiled, her glow softening. "Thank you, Joran, for your patience. And your heart." Their first attempt at intimacy was a mix of clumsiness and tenderness. Hilary's curiosity led to moments of laughter, like when she misunderstood the concept of a kiss and pressed her lips to his forehead instead of his mouth. But there were also moments of deep connection. As Joran guided her, their movements slow and deliberate, he felt a sense of closeness he had never experienced before. It wasn't just about the physical, it was about trust, vulnerability, and the unspoken bond that had grown between them. By the end of the evening, they lay side by side, their hands intertwined. "That was different," Hilary said, her voice soft. "In a good way?" Joran asked, turning to look at her. "In the best way," she replied, her glow warm and steady. For the first time, Joran felt like he wasn't just sharing his home with Hilary, he was sharing his heart. The days after Joran and Hilary's shared moment of vulnerability were some of the happiest and most confusing of their lives. Their bond had grown stronger, but with it came challenges neither of them had anticipated. Joran woke up one morning to find Hilary sitting by the window, her gaze distant. Her glow was dimmer than usual, a sign he had learned to recognize as her being deep in thought. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle. She turned to him, offering a faint smile. "Good morning, Joran. You seem off. What's on your mind?" he asked, sitting beside her. Hilary hesitated, her fingers playing with the hem of her tunic. "I have received a message from my people. They are requesting my report on the exchange program." Joran's heart sank. "Does that mean you'll have to leave?" "Not yet," she said quickly. "But they are asking for progress updates, including our bond." "Our bond?" Joran echoed, his chest tightening. Hilary nodded. "They are curious about the emotional and physical aspects of human relationships. They wish for me to provide detailed observations." Joran frowned. "That feels invasive. Are you okay with that?" "I am unsure," Hilary admitted. "On one hand, I understand their reasoning. But on the other, this feels deeply personal." Joran reached for her hand, his thumb brushing against her cool skin. "You don't have to tell them anything you're not comfortable sharing. This is your experience, not theirs." Hilary looked at him, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Joran. Your kindness reminds me why I chose to explore this with you." As the days went by, the weight of the message lingered. Hilary became more withdrawn, spending hours meditating or gazing at the stars. Joran tried to give her space, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between them. One evening, he found her in the backyard, her crystal sphere hovering beside her. The air was crisp, the stars bright against the dark sky. "Hilary," he said, approaching her. "Talk to me, please." She turned to him, her expression conflicted. "I am torn, Joran. My people value duty above all else. If I fail to provide what they seek, they may see this experiment as a failure. Do you care what they think?" Joran asked gently. "I care about their acceptance," she admitted. "But I also care about this. About us." Joran took a deep breath. "Then we have to make a choice. Either we let them dictate how we live, or we decide for ourselves what this means." Hilary's eyes glistened as she looked at him. "You speak with such conviction. How can you be so sure?" "Because I know how I feel," Joran said, his voice steady. And I'm not letting anyone take that away from me. Their conversation sparked a new determination in Hilary. Together, they crafted a message to her people, explaining that while she was committed to the exchange program, certain experiences were too personal to share. It was a risk, but one they were willing to take. In the meantime, they continued exploring their relationship, navigating the challenges of their differences. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Joran accidentally dropped a pan, causing a loud clang. Hilary jumped, her glow flaring briefly. "Sorry," he said, laughing. "Didn't mean to scare you." Hilary chuckled, her laughter like a soft melody. "Your unpredictability keeps life interesting, Joran. And your calm keeps me grounded," he replied with a smile. But not all challenges were light-hearted. The cultural differences between them sometimes led to misunderstandings. One day, Hilary expressed frustration over Joran's habit of keeping souvenirs from his travels, small trinkets that held sentimental value. "Why do you cling to objects?" she asked, her tone puzzled. "On my world, we believe the past is meant to be left behind." Joran hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because those objects remind me of the moments that shaped me. They're like anchors, keeping me connected to who I am." Hilary considered this, her gaze thoughtful. "Perhaps I need to find my own anchors here." Their bond continued to grow stronger, but the looming question of Hilary's future hung over them. One night, as they lay on the couch, Joran finally voiced the fear that had been gnawing at him. "What happens if they ask you to return?" Hilary was silent for a long moment. "I do not know. But I do know this. I do not wish to leave you, Joran." His chest tightened at her words, a mix of relief and dread swirling within him. "Then we'll figure it out. Together." She smiled, her glow softening. "Together." The weeks that followed felt like the calm before a storm. Joran and Hilary had fallen into a rhythm, but the question of her future remained a constant shadow. They shared laughter, tender moments, and stories of their vastly different worlds, yet neither dared to address the inevitable. One crisp morning, Joran woke to find Hilary gone from her usual meditation spot. Panic surged briefly, but then he spotted her in the backyard. She stood with her crystal sphere floating before her, its light flickering in an erratic pattern. "Everything okay?" Joran called, stepping outside. Hilary turned, her expression somber. "I received another message. My people have given me an ultimatum." Joran's stomach sank. "What kind of ultimatum?" "They demand that I return and bring my report. If I refuse, they may view my actions as a betrayal of our principles," she said, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. Joran rubbed the back of his neck, searching for words. "So what happens if you don't go back?" "I risk being cut off from my people entirely," Hilary admitted. "I would be considered an exile." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Joran felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "That's not fair. You've done nothing wrong." In their eyes, "I have chosen emotion over duty," she said, her gaze dropping to the ground. "It is not something easily forgiven." Joran stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "What do you want, Hilary?" "Not what they want, not what anyone else wants. Just you." Her luminous eyes met his, shimmering with unshed tears. "I want to stay with you. But the thought of losing my connection to my people, it frightens me." They spent the rest of the day talking, weighing the options. Hilary shared her fear of isolation, of never being able to return home. Joran spoke of his own struggles with belonging, how he had built a life on Earth after losing his family. "You're not alone anymore," he reminded her. "No matter what happens, I'll be here for you." Hilary's expression softened. "You have shown me more kindness than I ever expected to find here, Joran. You have become my home." That evening, they decided to confront the issue together. Hilary activated her crystal sphere, opening a direct line of communication with her people. The sphere projected a holographic image of an elder, their features angular and otherworldly, their eyes devoid of the warmth Joran had come to associate with Hilary. "Hilary," the elder said, their tone formal, "have you prepared your final report?" "I have not," Hilary replied, her voice steady. "I need more time." The elder's expression darkened. "Time is a luxury we cannot afford. You were sent to observe, not to indulge in personal pursuits." Joran bristled at the dismissive tone but held his tongue. With all due respect, Ilari continued, I have learned more about humanity than I ever expected. Their connections, their emotions, they are not weaknesses but strengths. They have taught me that true understanding requires more than observation. It requires experience. The elder's gaze flicked to Joran. Is this, human, the reason for your delay? Ilari straightened, her glow brightening. He is part of it, yes. But more than that, he has shown me that connection is not a distraction. It is a bridge between our worlds. The elder's expression hardened. You risk everything for this bridge. Do you truly believe it is worth the cost? Ilari hesitated, her gaze flicking to Joran. He gave her a small nod, his eyes filled with quiet encouragement. Yes, she said firmly. I believe it is. The elder was silent for a long moment before speaking. You are no longer bound by our expectations, Ilari. You have chosen your path, and it is one that leads away from us. The connection severed abruptly, the sphere dimming in Ilari's hands. Joran stepped forward, his heart aching at the pain etched on her face. I'm so sorry, Ilari. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I chose this. I chose you. And I would choose you again. Joran pulled her into his arms, holding her as she wept. You're not alone, he whispered. You'll never be alone. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotion. Ilari mourned the loss of her connection to her people, but she also found comfort in the life she was building with Joran. They began to make plans for their future, dreaming of what their unconventional relationship could become. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Joran took her hand. You gave up so much for me. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making it worth it. Ilari smiled, her glow warm and steady. You already have, Joran. You already have.